Hello brownies, and welcome back to the Pretty Brown Rise channel. I have missed you guys so much. I know you're excited for part 3 and we're going to jump on in there. But first, I'm big on fairness, so I want to start this with some updates, corrections, and clarifications for previous videos. For those of you who do not know, my channel is about edutainment, more so than just blatantly tearing people down. So as I get new information in and new revelations come to light, I would like to correct the info that I have. Because this video will be about granting grace and the psychology of things, I'd actually like to start with Rocky. As you know, there were rumors about him having other children, and I kept finding these other names and dates surrounding him, and one of which had his handle that he used on social media was Rocky Bivens II. What I have come to know now is that young man is his nephew. It appears as though his younger sister was a teen mom in Chicago with that baby. Rocky's career popped off. He had to move to Atlanta, and perhaps that's why those names follows him to Atlanta. He was being a great big brother and uncle, and perhaps that was the only father figure that young man had, because maybe his dad wasn't in the picture. And being impressed with his uncle's accomplishments and grateful to him, maybe that's why he chose that social media handle. I'm really not sure, but that's what I have right now. And speaking to the family aspect, if all of those conclusions are true, then it's easy to draw the conclusion that that's what helped Tasha fall in love with Rocky so quickly, because he just appeared to be a stand-up guy at that point in time. Even her dad, in that video that he did, the interview that he did say that at that time, he didn't have any reason to have reservations about whether or not Rocky would take care of his daughter, to be fair. Another thing that I want to touch on and point out is the fact that, toxic or not, they have been together almost 3 decades. So there must be some love there. Whether he's as in love as he says he is, there has to be some love there, guys. So even if their marriage is maybe not as legit as the father alluded to. But another thing I want to say is, in that Countess Vaughn video that I did earlier, he was talking about how he wasn't concerned about Tasha's weight. He loved her face. And so look at Tasha's glow up now. Sis did that. We have to give her things, okay? She looks phenomenal. And so what that says is, at the very least, Rocky does have an eye for talent. Now, the very last Rocky-related update that I wanted to do is in regards to Keisha Baby Miles. Remember, she replaced Candy in Xscape, and they gave her a little bit parts on like Tiny and Toya, let her work with the OMG girls. And then I even found that 2012 show called Dating and Pregnant that she was on. To be fair, I have not watched Tiny and Toya, hadn't even heard of Dating and Pregnant. But what I found to be odd was that it seems like after she had her baby, I don't see those real Xscape connections after 2013. And I was wondering what the fallout was kind of there. I also had found it to have an uncanny resemblance between her son and what we now know as Rocky's nephew. Another coincidence was the fact that Rocky's biological son plays basketball. Keisha Baby Miles' little boy plays basketball. Rocky's nephew is a musician. He has songs on Spotify. Keisha's little boy has his own songs and music videos. So just to be clear, I do not aim to bring out people into the spotlight that are not already public figures. These young men were in the entertainment industry, all of them in some way, which is why I spoke on them. But ultimately, the thing is, that baby's a minor, and Keisha Baby Miles is a beautiful and talented Black woman. If she wanted people to know who the father of her child is, it would be public knowledge. And also, I'd rather focus on all of their talents more so than the salaciousness attached to Rocky. So let's just move on with that. Now, the last amount of clarity is actually going to be more of a shout out, because it's coming from the comment section from one of you guys who I consider to be a part of my tribe. Now, let me explain tribe for people who may not know. I am actually building my own platform that will be a safe space with, the same social media component that these other social media things have, because I want a place for people to be able to speak freely, but also learn and grow on social media more so than just be messy. It's expensive to do, and I need all of the help that I could get, so I would appreciate your support. But the thing about forming my tribe is I don't want it to become an echo chamber, and I like learning from you all and hearing your opinions. Now, speaking of which, one of the comments in a previous video that had that clip from Unsung where the girls got into a fight in their rehearsal hall, and Tamika says that I jumped in to try to break it up, and then she started fighting me. And the she that she was referring to is what was in question. The commenter said that, well, I think she was talking about it was Candy that started fighting her, not her sister. And I want to be fair to that person and say that was my initial interpretation of who she was as well. However, as I started putting these videos together and doing all of that extensive research, what stood out to me was that recurring theme of how Tamika was trained to be a protector of her sister, and how just even the smallest things, how she would be so impacted by, oh, she really loved me. Remember that clip from earlier? Everything that her sister does has a bigger impact on her than what someone else would do. Also, to refresh your memory, in a previous video, I let you hear in Tamika's own words how she, because a little boy was making fun of her sister, didn't hit her, was just using his words. As soon as they got off the bus, Tamika didn't use her words. She picked up the biggest boulder that she could find, and she smashed the little boy over the head with it for making fun of his sister, her sister. So what I want to say about that fight is, why did she not pick up a keyboard and smash Candy over the head with it? And I think that it was because whatever was the catalyst of that fight, Latasha caused it, and Latasha was dead wrong in the situation. So much so that because she was friends with Candy too, she wanted to pull them apart. But in that instance, she chose not to be an attack dog for her sister. Which leads us to the actual point of part 3 of this series. So one of the things that really stood out was the fact that narcissism was brought up so much, like it's so blatantly obvious in this situation, and how many of you in the comments were talking about how narcissists in your lives have so negatively impacted you. And now, of course, to be clear, I'm not diagnosing these people because I'm not qualified. So what I did was extra research from a credible source like Psychology Today. And what the article that I found was talking about the toxic trio of dangerous personality traits. And when I'm telling you, I was just blown away by how specific it was and how it really related to this situation. So I wanted to make a video teaching you all about the different types, but also to let this serve as kind of like a warning or an informational video to let people know who maybe have people like this in their lives, or who any one of us could run into a person like this in the future, so that we do not get caught up in their web. So in this video, what it should help you do is to know for yourself if you are being manipulated by a social puppeteer. But not only that, we're going to express a little bit of compassion and grace for these people. So let's just get into the research. The self-centered narcissistic personality needs a willing audience to manipulate. And that's no matter how small the audience is, so long as they are blindly obedient and deferential. Not deferential. Listen, now I know some of y'all I just lost some people right there, okay? You know, sometimes it's the little ninth grade vocabulary words that'll get you caught up. And in this moment, amen, what I want to do is I want to grant you all some grace, okay? Because it is not your fault that word threw you for a loop. I blame the public school system. It's failing our youth, okay? Don't you be so hard on yourself. So when you hear deferential, you think respect, okay? But in context, what I just read that as is they like for somebody to kind of like respect them, look up to them, place them on a pedestal in a way, so to speak. Fair enough? Okay. And so the next thing that they say is they pull on your strings to make you believe in them, follow them, and act on their behalf. Come on now. And act on their behalf. Their grandiosity and sense of entitlement has no bounds. Isn't that something? So think about what that really sounds like and who we may be talking about here. And then now for me, this next part is what really tied it all together for me and really brought it on home. It says, in interpersonal relationships, they are always performing perception management so that they come out on top. Oh, this is dangerous. In a personal setting, like at home, spouses pay a heavy price. When they can no longer tolerate their self-centered spouse anymore, they realize that all they have to show for their efforts and dedications is exhaustion and the feeling that they were used. My goodness. Ooh, child, that is heavy. So let's just take a breath for a moment so that we can get into the bibbins of it all. Because clearly you knew that we were getting ready to talk about Ike and Tasha. Like, come on now. So one of the other things that the article mentions is how with words and actions, they use that, they intend to impress, seduce, and control the lives, thoughts, and perceptions of others to achieve their objective. And what that reminds me of particularly is two things. The first thing is that Countess Vaughn video that I did. If you have not seen it, go and see that so that you can understand why it's being referenced in this video and understand just how far he goes to make up a cockamamie story to curry favor with a viewing audience, you know, as if he's some great guy who's always been truly, madly, deeply in love with his wife. It literally makes no sense that, you know, if you just simply check the dates, sir, y'all had already met, married, and had a child before that episode even aired. So why would you even say that? Like, that's how deep the puppeteering goes. But it's not just for us. That was also for Latasha. He probably made that up like in the early 2000s or something like that after he had caused her first two albums, solo albums, to flop and said something sweet to get back into her good graces. But not only that, look at what he did to his sister-in-law. Honey, if you are willing to hack somebody's phone to get nudes or compromising photos and then, and threatening somebody to send out their tape, of them in the throes of passion, so to speak. I mean, what won't you do? That's disgusting right there. That's the highest and most dangerous level of narcissism to me. That's too far. That seems too much. Now that's extra. Maybe he's a Gemini. I don't know. Let's just move on. Okay, so now that brings us to the next type, which is the predator parasite. So let's get into it. So the article says, likewise, the social predator or parasite is also a puppeteer, but just in a different way. So unlike the narcissist, they don't need an audience. What they need are victims. So they can act out as either a predator or a parasite. You understand what I'm saying? Oh, that's deep and dangerous. Listen, it says it doesn't matter to them if it's a family member or a stranger, so long as their needs are met. Psychology today, I mean, they're just out here scaring you. You know what I'm saying? That's real deep. So they go on to say later, the social predator is like the self-centered narcissist in the way that what they share in common is they do seek to become supreme puppeteers. Okay, pulling strings, controlling lives, and manipulating others to get their way. Now, see, some of y'all just got to shiver down your spine because it's like, oh my goodness, that's so dangerous. But for some of y'all, you got a different feeling. Okay. And once again, we out here granting grace in this in this part of the series. We're granting grace. So for some of you, for everybody now, just to know which side of it you're on, whether you're the victim or the victimizer, just pick up the line. If you don't get a dial tone, what that means is the call is coming from this side of the house. Okay, so I'm just saying now, for some of y'all now, go look in the mirror and see if your reflection is still there. Because listen, this predator parasite, they might be sitting in your clothes, is what I'm saying. They might be walking around here looking like you and acting like you and getting people to think that you one of them. But we know better, right? Because y'all would act like that, right? I sure hope not. But let's talk about who does act like that. Yes, indeed. Well, let's not waste time. Let's just get right into it and talk about La Gospel Snot. Come on, somebody. Let's talk about the gospel singer with the ungodly life, who got all on the world stage talking about and making fun of each and every one of her band members, her group members. Tiny and Candy Can't Sing took them too long to record. Low-key making fun of and taking jabs at the so-called mistresses by flaunting her ring low-key in that same video when she was making fun of her group mates. I don't know how many of you all caught that because Latasha doesn't even wear her ring all the time. And furthermore, Rocky never wears his. And then even when she is wearing a ring, I don't see an actual wedding band along with it. So once again, we taking jabs at mistresses and dismissing them. But the question is, are you for real married? That's all I'm asking. And if you are, my condolences, but let's move on. So after you have made fun of everybody, and then knowing that you have stolen from your sister, tried to blackmail your sister and all of these other things, you try to convince the world that she's crazy and then dare her to produce the receipts. If it's true, then prove it. And then she does exactly what you ask and she proves it. And then all of a sudden you turn yourself into the victim. But while you're giving your half-hearted made up apology and trying to clean things up, you still have selective memory. I don't remember Candy being sad all of the time, but if I hurt you, if I didn't hear you, if you go back and listen to that video, not only did she never really give a sincere apology, but listen to the things that she even half-heartedly apologized for. It's really disturbing. Child, at some point in time, I really want you all to think about this and ask yourselves, how messy do you have to be that for when you go and try to clean up your mess, it just makes things worse? Here's another thing that I want you to focus on from the Psychology Today article. It's about how this type of puppeteer can either be a predator or a parasite, okay? You could either be the type of person that you prey upon them and abuse them, isolate them, bully them like you did Candy, or you can be the parasite and leech off of them like you did your sister. You understand what I'm saying? It can be either or, because they said you'll use a stranger off the street, or it can be your own family. And I'm telling you, the mind game that they were playing on Tamika is exactly like I said. These types of narcissists, these types of people are the type of folks that will steal your money and then blame you for not hiding it better. Steal your money and help you look for it. And then try to convince the world that you're crazy and tell them that you need counseling. It's the adding insult to injury for me. But to just wrap this segment up and bring it on back home, the point is you don't care how it inconveniences someone else and what they have to lose. I laid it all out on the line, how much it costs Tamika running behind you and following you. You all don't care. Just as long as you get what you want out of the deal. You do not care. So let's go ahead and move on to the third type in the trio. Now, as it pertains to the emotional, unstable, dramatic type of puppeteers, right? So let's get into that. The emotionally unstable puppeteers habitually tug at your emotional strings, leaving you drained or exhausted, as you must always be filling their cup while yours runs empty. These are the ones whom you never know how they'll wake up. Not what mood they'll be in. They might snap at you and revile you with rage over small slights and then want to make up with you an hour later. They'll scold you verbally and then be like, okay, well, let's go shopping. These are the examples that they're giving in the article. And again, I'll have that link in the description. But what it says is, goes on to say later on in the article, is the emotionally unstable have a need to be the center of your attention, and their needs always come first. Okay. And this is totally unrelated to anything that we have said or discussed in this episode. But I just want to take this time to formally apologize. Formally apologize to anybody who has ever known me or met me in my life. Okay? But this is what I want you to know. We are talking about puppeteers. Amen? We are talking about this stuff in this Psychology Today article. This is talking about people who do things like this with malicious intent. There is no malice coming from people like me. I'm just a Gemini. That means my default setting is extra. I'm just extra. But malicious, I am not, okay? So I ain't got to pick up the line, okay, to see whether the calls come from inside the house. And also, don't nobody have house phones no more. And lastly, mind your business and stay on topic, because we ain't talking about me, right? We talking about somebody else. Now let's move on. So let me be clear, whereas I understand that this series had started with being about Tamika and what was done to her, one of my Pretty Brown Rise isms is anything that lacks balance will eventually lead to chaos. Inevitably lead to chaos. And so that means for me, even though I love her down, Tamika has to get her piece too. Now, about her being emotional or about her being extra, that's her default setting. That is her personality. There's no malice behind it. Kind of like what I was saying about myself. It's just who she is and how she is. You can definitely tell that she got her musical talent, her sense of humor, and pretty much everything from her father. In fact, as I was putting this video together, there was a second part, like a part 2 interview with her dad from the Juice podcast. So please go and check out both of those. And when you do, you will actually understand a whole lot more about the Scott sisters. But let's just get back to the emotional, dramatic part, okay? So I know immediately some of you, because for some strange reason, a lot of people really hate Candy. But I know some of you were probably thinking, well, Candy's the one that cries all of the time. And you're 100% correct. Candy is very emotional. She can, I'm sure, to other people seem dramatic. However, here is the big difference. Candy is doing things like that in response to being attacked by people. Also, I don't recall situations where she is the one who is attacking someone else for no reason. And that is the big difference between her and her former bestie, Tamika. So even with knowing where it comes from and why she does what she does, personal responsibility and fairness dictates that we still have to address her behavior because it is dramatic and it shows an instability there, okay? And it's emotional. It's her against the world if anybody in the world says or does anything to her family, and in particular, her sister. But also, it speaks on being dramatic and being the center of attention. We must admit to wait 10 years until you are in your mama's house and on camera to talk about money that was stolen from you over a decade ago and air your family out on national television. That is dramatic, wouldn't you say? Okay, so we still have to give her her piece for that too, even though we can understand and sympathize with the fact that she really was wronged. But the part that really got me in the article was when it talked about that these types of people absolutely dread being alone. And so they'll do or say anything to make you stay around. And that part, we have heard Tamika in that very same receipts video talk about how she does what they tell her because she does not want to be alone and she doesn't want to be ostracized, okay? But now the real bonus portion that I want to add to this video is even more backstory that we've mentioned and touched on, but I don't think that we went deep enough, because what we have to do is talk about who raised these children and what went into making them act the way that they do as individuals and then also towards each other. So now we're going to take a look at the parents just a little bit closer. And of course, we're gonna have to start with the mother, because if I don't think y'all will let me live. All this woman did is said two things: I am the fifth member, and that Tamika was jealous, and y'all been going in on her ever since. So let's talk about how her words and the things that she instilled in them when they were small made them the way that they are now, and why we should grant them a little bit of grace. So let's talk about the type of social puppeteering that she incorporated into her parenting style. I visualize it as her dangling a carrot of affection in front of her two daughters for them to sort of compete over, right? And then also a difference in the way that she raised them and what she instilled in the two of them, the difference in the parenting style. For one child, Latasha, you put a battery in her back. So let's think about what that is. You gave her literally power. You empowered her. You energized her to go out and follow her dreams. Whereas what we see more so with Tamika is she's more like your wind up toy. You just kind of wind her up, and then you put her in the direction that you want her to go, which is to be this protector and this kind of attack person, the security guard for her sister. The problem with that is it doesn't really allow Tamika the same type of energy and power to begin with, and confidence to chase her dreams, which is no doubt going to play into that competitive nature and that competition that started with these girls so long ago in their childhood. So the point I'm making is what we see them playing out on TV is just the roles that they were taught early in their childhood, which is why we should grant them a little bit of grace on their behavior. But also, as we're granting grace, should we not also grant that same grace to Mama Gloria? And here is why. Okay, so let's be fair. Perhaps their dad was not exactly a deadbeat, like Latasha alluded to on the show. However, two things can be true, right? So let's keep it real. When you leave, or when there is a divorce and the breadwinner is outside of the house, you are going to have some financial hardships. Okay. So listen now, maybe Mama G was dangling that one carrot for those two girls because that's all that she had. There wasn't no food in the pantry. It meant that's all that was left in the ice box. Okay. So that lady was really doing the best that she could with the hand that she was dealt. Not to mention that now she is a middle-aged, divorced woman with two children as a single mom. And she has what, a 10, 12-year gap in her employment history and resume? Did we forget? Mama G was actually a housewife. So she wasn't working. So as she was sitting at the house concentrating on being a wife and mother, the world was passing her by. What did her prospects look like in the romantic world and in as far as a career in the career fields for someone who had been out of the game that long and then also coming into the game with that much new baggage? So let's just grant her some grace there. Because you have to realize when a man is the breadwinner and he's the only source of income, that means he holds all the cards, all of the power, making him actually her puppeteer. So since we've granted everybody else some grace, let's see what type of grace that we can grant him and what type of puppeteer he was. So not only did he hold all the cards financially in the household, he was also a police officer by trade. So that's dual levels of the type of authority that he had. So he was basically all powerful, right? So when we talk about that carrot that she was dangling on a string, let's talk about who was dangling her on a string. Because people love to always talk about, as it pertains to children, and blaming Latasha and Tamika's behavior on their mom. They love to say, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. One thing I always want you to remember is that in every situation, whether both parents are physically present or not, it's always two trees. So let's discuss now and get the backstory on the two trees that he came from with one more little small excerpt from the Juice podcast, which I do once again want to encourage you all to click that link in the description and go and listen to this in its entirety. But let's let him tell his own story so that you can understand where this man is coming from and grant him some grace.
I was born in 1952 in Detroit, Michigan. My father and mother were separated. My mom lived in Georgia, and I had two brothers, and I was the oldest. So my mom would always say, if I ever leave you, I'm going to leave you with your daddy. You're no good daddy. She left me with my dad. I became a gang leader. I was very violent. And I said, if I ever have children, I would never want my children to go through what I've gone through. I said, if I have divorce, I would still be an instrument in their life. I had a resentment for my mom when I came here because I felt like my mom didn't care for me like she did for my other two brothers. I took care of my mom until she passed. And the thing that I told God, I said, thank God that I didn't allow my humanistic to move in, because there was hate there. There was animosity there. I said, but the love of God overshadowed everything. So I loved my mom with agape love.
So here again, we have a man who had a poor relationship with his own mother and a poor opinion of his mom or women as a man with a wife and two daughters. That is going to play a factor into how he treats them. Also, this is a man who is a product of poor parenting. So he's doing the best that he can with what he knows. He blames his mom a lot for dropping him off with his dad, but that's the lie that society tells, is that a woman cannot raise a boy to be a man. So she left you with your dad, but she gave you the keys to your freedom. And it's amazing to me that in a similar type situation with siblings like he had, just the way his daughters have, the key that she had in your back was indeed that, a key. Which was the key to your freedom, but not a winding key to pull you around like that, the way that the mom is doing to Tamika. But it's all about interpretation. You interpreted yourself. The way you saw it was that you were in some sort of prison, a mental prison that you held because you held on to that anger from your mom and it held you back. Meanwhile, I don't know for sure what type of father you had, but only thing that we can do is one could assume that he was kind of a piss poor dad if you ended up a violent gang leader, right? But yet and still, you had more smoke for your mom. And that just kind of brings me to my point. We're always going to blame women more for what men do or don't do. However, what we have in the Scott family is a bunch of broken people breaking other people. And that's why we should grant everyone involved some grace. But as we get that understanding, in order to grant people grace, I want to also make sure that we're getting that understanding of this toxic trio, because be ye not deceived, the full dynamic is still in place because both of the parents are still alive and these women are still married and they're interacting with each other. So nothing has changed. This is still a narcissistic situation, except for Rocky now. And I still have him in the same uniform. Why? Because he too used to work security for celebrities just like their dad. And then also, so does Tamika's husband. Now think of the irony in that. And also, I'm leaving the dad up there and leaving him in that position because he apparently still lives rent-free in Mama G's head as if they just got divorced yesterday. And Mama G is still manipulating Latasha and using her to manipulate Tamika. So that dynamic is still in place. But to be clear, even when the parents are gone or they step away from those leadership roles in their daughters' lives, this dynamic will still be in play. This narcissism, this puppeteering will still go on as long as Latasha and Rocky are married. Rocky is still going to be the main puppeteer that is using Latasha to put her in the back of Tamika, except for we just got to look a little bit closer at this thing now. See, because it's not a battery or a wind-up key that he's putting in Tamika's back. Latasha has now become a parasite to her sister, leeching off of her, making her sick from the inside out. The roles have just switched up a little bit, but the game and the damage remains the same. So now that we know Rocky is the predator, Tasha is the parasite, and what they're doing to her makes her unstable, makes Tamika unstable in a various number of different ways. All right, now, baby, I just broke that thing down like a fraction, okay? So I hope that you received it. I hope it blessed you. I hope it helped you. And so I hope because of that, you will bless me to help me go ahead and build this platform. But either way, whether you do or you don't, I will be back to see you for part 4, where I will definitively show you with extra receipts a more definitive and refined timeline and the exact numbers and contract amounts for the different record deals to show you definitively who broke up Xscape, why they broke up, and the extent of the damage that was done in the process. I'll see you in part 4.